It's Monday, February 8th. Welcome to another episode of Legal Briefs. I'm Wes Austin. I'm a lawyer trying to keep you updated on the latest legal news. All right, the House impeachment managers filed their brief. We are going to be taking a look at that today. It was 80 pages long. Don't worry, we're not going to be looking at all 80 pages. Just a few different highlights here and there. So, just so we're all on the same page, Donald Trump, there was one article of impeachment. It was that he committed a high crime and misdemeanor by inciting insurrection, the insurrection that happened on January 6th. Okay, that is what is at issue from the article of impeachment. So let's dig in. We're going to start looking at the trial memorandum of the United States House of Representatives in the impeachment trial of President Donald J. Trump. So let's start off looking at one line from the brief. The nation will indeed remember January 6th, 2021, and President Trump's singular responsibility for that tragedy. President Trump's singular responsibility for that tragedy? Okay, so no one else was involved, just Donald Trump. So the brief did also recite some of the language from Donald Trump. For example, here's a part. He exhorted the crowd to fight much harder to stop the steal and to take back our country. Later, he declared, we fight like hell, because if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. He also told the crowd that you'll never take back our country with weakness and that you'll have to show strength. So the brief did go over some of the language he used. Definitely not smart language for Donald Trump to have used in those speeches with that size of a crowd. But again, the law is not whether it was smart to say it. Like, was it dumb to say? Was it not helpful to say? That's not what the law is. So what we want to do is see an analysis that shows why this language would meet this Brandenburg v. Ohio case that sets the precedent on how a political speech should be looked at when you determine whether it's inciting violence or not inciting violence. So we've got the language that he said. Now we want to see an analysis of that to show us and argue why that crossed the line and actually violated this Brandenburg v. Ohio test. So they also had several statements from members of the House where they said why they voted for impeachment. You know, here's one from Representative John Katko, and here's another one from Representative Tom Rice. Then there's one from Representative Adam Kinzinger. But here's the thing. In a legal brief, you're going to be arguing the Constitution or statutes or case law and then the facts. It doesn't really matter what some person says or thinks. It's whether the law was broken or whether something should be a high crime and misdemeanor. I mean, they have a lot of people here that they quote, which is great. I just don't know how that's relevant to any of this. Like, we have a huge long list of people that really hate Donald Trump. Okay. That's not really relevant to what we're looking at here, but okay, let's look at this quote. Indeed, hundreds of people have already been arrested and charged for their roles in the events of January 6th. There is no reason for Congress to delay in holding accountable the president who incited the violent attack. Okay, so there are hundreds of people who've been arrested and charged. Okay, so Donald Trump is not singularly responsible for it then. Like your earlier statement is not exactly true, because if you've arrested this is hundreds. So other people at least were involved. Now, I think the core issue that should have been argued here was whether the speech given by Donald Trump on January 6th incited the insurrection. Okay? Now, and that really comes down to, was he exercising his freedom of speech? And did he cross that line that is defined in Brandenburg v. Ohio? And, you know, you're kind of waiting to see how this brief is finally going to address it. Well, they address it in a very wild way that I never would have guessed. Let's just read this quote. President Trump's incitement of deadly violence to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power and to overturn the results of the election was therefore a direct assault on core First Amendment principles. Holding him accountable through conviction on the article of impeachment would vindicate First Amendment freedoms. Wait a minute. What? So President Trump's speech, he was assaulting the First Amendment. How? And so we need to hold him accountable to vindicate our First Amendment freedoms. I don't understand this at all. He was exercising his freedom of speech. We have a case on point on this, which you still haven't brought it up. And then you throw this crazy curveball, which is, do you know what he was doing? He was attacking the freedom of speech. What? How? That's insane. I just, come on. I just expected a lot more from the brief as far as, let's be intellectually honest. Let's analyze the facts according to what the law is. And then let's make our best argument that way. I don't even know what this is. I mean, I guess that's just kind of a Jedi mind trick to make you forget that there might be a freedom of speech issue here. Just actually, he's attacking it. Oh, is he? Well, let's get him. But he's not. This is really lost. This is the point where I was kind of upset reading this brief because I just thought, what is happening here? This is not even close to what a legal brief should look like. Okay, then the brief says this. Therefore, as scholars from across the political spectrum have recognized, the First Amendment does not apply at all to an impeachment proceeding. What? I've never heard that before, ever. The First Amendment just doesn't apply here. So let's just get rid of the First Amendment so that we can get him, right? That seems like this is the core part where I'm thinking, wow, they're basically wanting to let's trash the First Amendment so that we can get Donald Trump. Yeah. That's not, look, we don't curtail the rights of citizens so that you can get someone. The freedom of speech is meant to protect people that you don't like. It's meant to protect speech that you're not happy with. And people can believe things that are wrong. They still have the freedom of speech. So anyway, this statement here, as scholars from across the political spectrum have recognized, the First Amendment does not apply at all to impeachment proceeding. Wow. Let's see if they cite the Constitution for that. Do they cite statutes for that? Do they cite case law for that? Footnote 201. Let's go down to 201. Okay. There's no case law cited, there's no statute cited, and the Constitution's not cited, of course. It looks like they're citing a bunch of articles here. Now, do you see what I'm seeing on the dates and times of all these articles? They've all been posted or published in the last few weeks, after January 6th. Here's January 20th, 2021. Here's January 19th, 2021. Here's January 8th, 2021. January 8th, 2021. The next footnote, January 19th, 2021. So you didn't have any support whatsoever in any case law, statutes, the Constitution, to say freedom of speech doesn't apply to impeachment proceedings. So did you just go out and get your buddies that are law school professors and say, hey, will you write an article that says this? Because then I can cite it, and it will look like we have support to say what we want to say. I don't know, maybe there should be a rule that if something was published in the last 10 minutes, you can't cite it in the impeachment brief. It's not cool when you go out and try. I don't know exactly what happened, but it sure looks like you ran out and had somebody write something quick so that you could cite to it. Why are all of these things cited recently? Why are all of these things published so recently then? You found a lot of law professors who hate Donald Trump. Okay, well, good job. There's a lot of people who hate Donald Trump. I mean, you found some. Great. So here's another statement we can look at that doesn't make sense to me. Just as a president may legitimately demand the resignation of a cabinet secretary who publicly disagrees with him on a matter of policy, which President Trump did repeatedly, the public's elected representatives may disqualify the president from federal office when they recognize that his public statements constitute a violation of his oath of office and a high crime against the constitutional order. What? No, that's not at all right. I mean, the president's power to fire somebody in the cabinet. Yeah, of course. And you're basically saying, yeah, Congress has the same thing, they can fire the president. Like, no, they can't. The only thing they can do is impeach the president and then go through the impeachment process. This kind of makes it sound like you're just like, see, I mean, he can fire them, so we can fire him. That's not how it works. You've got a process, you've got a structure, you've got steps you have to go through. This is very confusing. And this is not at all the same thing. So it took us getting down to page 46 before the brief cited to the Brandenburg v. Ohio case, which I happen to think is the controlling issue to determine whether this political speech was okay or whether it crossed the line and incited this insurrection. So anyway, almost to page 50 before they cited it. And let's see how they cite it. Just speech is not protected where it is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. And that footnote 206, that's citing to Brandenburg v. Ohio. So this is the law, okay? When you're determining whether a political speech is okay or not. You know, was it directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action, and was it likely to incite or produce such action? So that is the law that we should be looking at when we look at all the statements made by Donald Trump to determine if he did incite this insurrection. They throw out some of his statements, and then they say, this plainly satisfies that standard. So what is that? That's like... So it looks like they used 4 lines to analyze the facts and apply the facts to the law and then come to the conclusion that plainly satisfies that standard. 4 lines. That, like this, to me, this should have been the entire brief, which is giving us this analysis on why you feel like this violated this standard and why this incited the insurrection, which is why he committed a high crime and misdemeanor. That should have been the whole brief. This is four lines. 4 lines. If this was like a law school exam answer, you'd get an F. Okay, this is a very conclusory, yep. Okay. So then the brief goes on to talk about the other issue, which is whether the Senate has jurisdiction over this trial because he is a private citizen now. I did talk a little bit more about that on another video, but in this particular section, they cite a lot of historical, some older cases. They also do talk about the Constitutional Convention. They bring up a number of things to support their position where we think the Senate does have jurisdiction over Donald Trump to conduct this trial. Now, I did find one thing interesting about this question as to whether it's constitutional for the Senate to conduct the trial of Donald Trump now that he's no longer the president. So they cited Federalist paper number 39, Federalist number 39, written by James Madison, the father of the Constitution. And here's a quote from that. The President of the United States is impeachable at any time during his continuance in office. Okay. Do you want me to read that again? Let me read that again. The President of the United States is impeachable at any time during his continuance in office. And then they spend the next chunk of time trying to explain why that isn't what it said. I mean, it's pretty clear to me. It's not really ambiguous, that part. That seemed pretty clear. But I at least admire your attempt. At least you acknowledged that James Madison said that in the Federalist Papers. And then you tried to say that that's not what he really meant. But I'm glad you at least acknowledged it. Good job. All right, well, those were some of my thoughts on the House impeachment manager's brief. Apologize if I did get a little pissed off at points. Some of it I found kind of annoying. So based on what they said in the brief, I think the Senate trial is probably going to be political theater and kind of a circus. So I'm excited to watch it. I can't wait. All right. Thanks for watching. See you next time.